All right, welcome everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. See that there's already some questions. If you're having issues with WSL, feel free to come after our last presentation and I can hop on Discord and walk you through any issues that you're having. But we'll get started momentarily, let people join in. Somebody could say hi in the chat to let me know that they can hear me. That would also be fantastic. Awesome, thank you. All right, so go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our second presentation. Yeah, if you're asking this about our previous presentation, um, I can explain it a little bit more after our last presentation, but um, yes, server, you can check, well, it wouldn't be through server logs, it would be more through, um, you can check Nmap, you can detect Nmap scans um, through IDSs. You can monitor all traffic going through usually a switch. Um, and you can see all the traffic that's going back and forth, who it's going to, which port it's going to. Um, so yeah, if it sees that some system is getting is doing a bunch of handshakes on several thousand 65,525 or 526 ports, it'll obviously know, hey, what's going on. That's why you start check anomalies. Not sure what you mean by check anomalies. Um, you can definitely see anomalies. You can also use Wireshark to see if somebody is checking your ports pretty easily. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get started on this presentation. So, introduction to PHP and directory enumeration. So this is going to be your first presentation, actually teaching you skills that you'll need to know for the King of the Hill competition for tomorrow. This is meant to introduce you with the basics of PHP and the basics of directory enumeration. And by directory enumeration, I'll explain a little bit more in detail, but that is referring to web directory enumeration. So when you go into your browser and you go to like, um, um, you know, a website /home or /login, um, those usually are not defined anywhere. Most of the time, they are defined in some places. So you can use brute forcing to get those directories. But we'll go ahead and cover PHP first, and then we'll look at directory enumeration. So PHP, as compared with JavaScript, which is run on the client side, which means that all the code that's being executed on the client side is visible, all PHP is executed server side, which means that the server runs that PHP code and displays it out to the user. That PHP code is never available and never visible to the user. Um, um, Usually, I mean, there are some special exceptions, but 99% of the time, you should not be able to see the PHP code that's running. Um, this was a common way to handle databases, where you would have some you would have PHP interacting with the database because the credentials were not visible to the user, and you could store sessions on PHP with the user. It was easy to keep all of that secret, but the issue is that PHP by default is kind of like C, where if you aren't careful, it is very insecure. You can cause a lot of damage if you're not careful with PHP. Writing PHP code, you do need a PHP interpreter. I won't be going over how to set that up. It's pretty easy to install a PHP interpreter, and then you can just run HTML. You'll need like a PHP server to run to load HTML, and then you use the tags angle, like less than sign, question mark PHP. To start, just like HTML, you have this HTML and slash HTML. In PHP, you have question mark PHP and question mark closing angle bracket. So this can be put into any HTML code that's being executed by PHP. A common way to check if PHP is running, you can put inside of that PHP enclosure, you can put PHP info, parentheses, and then a semicolon, and this will basically just print out the PHP info. And there's an example later on where you will see what that will look like on the page. So I'm going to go over some common vulnerabilities. The first one is not necessarily a PHP vulnerability, but a very common misconfiguration that usually leads to something called SQL injection. I will not be going into SQL injection, but this little picture here is a great example, where basically you're sending in, if you're in this case they're filling out like a form. You fill out a form, and then you put inside drop table students, which in MySQL basically means to drop to delete a database table, which is very bad because it would just like delete all the users in that database. What they're doing here is because they didn't check for the apostrophe that's there. Sometimes apostrophe is okay for a name anyway. Apostrophe is fine because there are some names with apostrophes in them. You would likely check for closing parentheses or semicolons. You need to make sure that you ignore those, because if you don't, then well, you end up with this, where you lose a bunch of data because you didn't sanitize your database inputs. So, very common vulnerability. You won't be exploiting it in the King of the Hill competition, but it's something to always check for. LFI, so this stands for local file inclusion. So a lot of the times when if you look at the top of your screen on, say you have a website that you're going to, and you see some website.com/script.php question mark indicates this is some sort of parameter for that page, and then you'll see like page equals index.html. That's something you might see. Well, what would happen if you change that page.html or index.html to ... /etc/password? What do you get? Well, you get the password file. It doesn't contain the passwords, but it contains the list of users for a Linux system. So this is what is called local file inclusion. Now, there's a lot of other really neat tricks you can do with local file inclusion to get data, but basically you're going to be grabbing a file on the system from whatever path, and in this case they're using the default path, which is usually slash var ht or var there's var http. I'd have to look it up. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. Um, but there is like a default directory that you'll usually um, find a website in PHP scripts in. So they're just using the default here. You can usually list out the directory as well using some other file inclusion commands, but here's a common vulnerability. You can also get very lucky and execute directly execute PHP code. Sometimes they'll have like just straight up just a PHP interpreter inside of the website where you can just type in PHP code. If you type in PHP info parentheses semicolon and execute it, and you get a page on the right, here's your PHP info. If you get something like this, that means you have the ability to execute code on the server. So you can execute any code that you want on the server as the user. And then at that point, it becomes trivial to execute to get what is called a shell or get access to that server using something like a reverse shell cheat sheet. So if I go in here, I can look up PHP. I believe I have this linked in the description as well. And you see that we have under PHP, this is executing PHP through the PHP command. This is what we would execute. Actually, we wouldn't assign it to a variable here. We would just execute this command, and this would give us a reverse shell. So you would put your own IP address here, your local IP address, and then a local port that's listening for a connection, and then this would just connect back to you, and you would have a shell, and you would have access to that system. So it becomes very trivial if you have direct execution of PHP code in a browser. var www or var www html. Yes, that is correct. Thank you. All right. So now to look at directory enumeration. A lot of the times, you won't have the first page that loads up won't be a PHP executable. Like you won't be able to execute PHP code, or maybe it won't be a local file inclusion. A lot of times the initial page that you load up to will not be like that. So you need to enumerate the all of the sub locations inside of the web server. So say a lot of the times there's like a /admin page. If you go to /admin, and you can type in stuff, and you can maybe brute force a login there, but you need to know if there's a /admin. Maybe they renamed it to, admin 1234. That's where you have to go now to log in as admin. I believe WordPress is /wp-admin. So you would use something like directory enumeration to be able to enumerate all of the directories that are available. Really quickly, a really easy way to tell if there's some pages that aren't some other directories that may be interesting is to check the robots.txt file. If you go into a website and you do /robots.txt as the directory, then you'll get something that looks similar to this image here. What it's saying here is that a user agent of manbot is not allowed to access these directories. There is no bots are allowed to access these directories. This bot is not allowed to access anything at all. And then the slurp bot has a crawl delay of 4. I'm not 100% sure what that means. I assume it means to delay Um, when it's crawling the website, it needs to have a delay between. Oh, it actually explains here. Wait 120 milliseconds before crawling each page. Um, Now, what this can tell you is that a lot of times you don't want to crawl administrator pages. They don't want to be indexed on the main Google page. So they'll add in here something like user agent star disallow slash admin. And that'll tell you if you look at the robots.txt, um, like it says in the presentation, a way to it's a way to tell which pages a bot shouldn't look at, but it's also a way to tell hackers which pages they should be looking at. Um, so yeah, that's usually a good check. Usually it's not my first check. Usually I'll go for uh, one of the brute forcing tools and then check the robots, because the brute forcing tool usually take a little while. So I'll usually get that started and then look at the robots.txt. So brute forcing. So I'll be showing you two tools. Um, so directory enumeration with GoBuster. GoBuster is one of my favorite um, directory brute forcing tools. It uses the Go language, and it's very fast. It's multi-threaded, and I just find it to be a very nice directory enumeration tool. The command is very simple to understand. GoBuster directory, or dir, -u website. So this will be like google.com in this case, and then word list with -w, and then the word list. And you would put the path to a word list. If you're using something like Kali Linux, you are already given a whole bunch of word lists on /user/share/word lists. But if you are on Windows, I recommend, or not on Windows, sorry. If you're not on Kali, or you're on another version of Linux, I recommend using something called seclists. It's this first link here. Seclists is just a bunch of lists of the most commonly used passwords and directories. So in here we have like usernames, 10 million usernames in this one, common base 64, family names, names.txt. You also have passwords. So these are very popular. 500 worst passwords. What's the most popular one that I usually use? In this list, I will generally use this 2020 200 most passwords, or common credentials. 10 million passwords top 100 is usually good. Another list that I usually recommend is the RockU list. RockU word list. Oh, well, it downloaded. This is probably this is usually my go-to first, is this RockU. It's like the top like 10,000, I think, passwords. For directories, though, Seclist actually does have a list for directories as well. So discovery, I believe, web content. You can go through here and look whenever you're deciding, but directory list -1.0, or I usually use small or medium are usually my favorites. So I recommend those two for doing directory enumeration. I recommend downloading this repository. It shows you right here how to download it. All right. go ahead, go on to the next one. So I do want to show you really quickly a program called FFUF. I think FUF is how you're supposed to say it. I'm not 100% sure. I don't like it as much. It's supposed to be very fast, but I haven't found it to be any faster than GoBuster, and I feel that GoBuster has a few more features. So personally, I use GoBuster, but the room at the very end of the presentation um, is using FFUF, but you could easily switch over to GoBuster for that as well. So FFUF dash U, the address dash W, and then the word list again. Quick note on recursive checking. I usually do not enable recursive checking because once you find your first directory, a first hidden directory, it'll lead you down a lot of hidden directories. There was a machine that I did where you did have to recursively go through a bunch of directories, like through a whole list of directories. But if you're doing recursive checking, it's usually makes it very, very, very slow. So I usually don't recommend doing recursively. But if you did, I believe the tag is -R for recursive on both GoBuster and FFUF. So I did link it in the description. It's the Room FFUF to learn more about the tool. I only recommend task 1 through 5 because the ones after that, I think 6 through 8, are a little bit out of the scope of what we're looking for. FFUF does have like brute forcing for passwords and stuff. We won't be covering that, but it is really neat and really cool to look at if you're interested in doing that. So, does anybody have any questions? We finished a bit early, which is rare. So if you want to ask any questions, feel free to ask them. We have a couple minutes. Let me switch back over so you can actually see the slides. I'm sorry about that. I always forget. What was the last thing? So I believe I showed. Yeah, I believe I showed this slide. Here's FFUF, and then recursive checking, and then here's the final slide with the link. Only half of the slide is shown right now. Hopefully it's showing better now. Hopefully the stream's doing okay. It looks like the bitrate went down. Picture is blocking the bottom of the white box. I don't think the white box is important in this case, but I'll make it a little bit. Yeah, it's not covering anything here, anything important. So. If nobody has any questions, we will hop over to our next presentation in about 3-4 minutes to look at FTP and what was our last one? FTP and password cracking. Yep, that was it. And that one is going to be a lot of fun because it's going to be very practical, and we're going to actually be doing some password cracking and accessing FTP. So we'll see everyone there.